I learned 3 important lessons on the morning of February 4th. Never underestimate a snowstorm in Wisconsin. Never trust a homeowners association with too much power. And never, under any circumstances, let Patricia Henderson think she has leverage over you. My name is Nathan York, and I run a small construction and landscaping business in Greendale, Wisconsin, a suburb just outside Milwaukee. I had been living in the Meadowbrook Commons subdivision for about 5 years, operating my business from my property with all the proper permits and licenses. The HOA had never been a problem until Patricia took over as president 18 months ago. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning when I was doing inventory in my equipment barn. I had just acquired 3 brand new commercial-grade plow blades the week before, anticipating the late winter storms that Wisconsin is famous for. My property sits on 2 acres at the edge of the subdivision, grandfathered in before the HOA decided that all lots had to be exactly half an acre. The barn where I kept my equipment was completely legal, properly zoned for commercial use, and clearly visible from the road. I was checking the hydraulic connections on one of the new blades when I heard a car pull up my driveway. Through the open barn door, I saw Patricia's silver Mercedes SUV, complete with the little HOA board member placard she had made for herself. She stepped out wearing what I can only describe as her battle uniform: pressed khakis, a polo shirt with the Meadowbrook Commons logo embroidered on it, and her trademark pearl necklace that she touched whenever she was about to say something she thought was important. "Nathan," she called out, not waiting for an invitation before walking into my barn. "We need to discuss your equipment situation." I wiped my hands on a rag and turned to face her. Patricia was in her early 50s, with highlighted blonde hair styled in that particular way that required weekly salon visits. Her lipstick was the color of dried blood, and her smile never reached her eyes. "Good morning, Patricia. What can I do for you?" She walked around my barn like she owned the place, her shoes clicking on the concrete floor. "I have been reviewing the HOA bylaws, and I noticed something interesting. Section 12, paragraph 4 states that any resident operating a business within the subdivision must make their resources available to the community in times of emergency." I frowned, setting down the wrench I had been holding. "That is about generators during power outages." Old Mr. Chen wrote that clause back in 2008 after that ice storm. He had a big generator and would let people charge their phones and keep their medications cold. The wording says resources, Nathan, not specifically generators. Patricia pulled out a printed copy of the bylaws, which she had helpfully highlighted in yellow. "With the major storm system coming in this weekend, I think it would be appropriate for you to make your snow removal equipment available to the HOA for clearing common areas." I had been watching the weather reports. They were predicting anywhere from 18 to 30 inches of snow starting Friday night, with winds up to 50 miles per hour. It was going to be a significant storm, the kind that shuts down highways and causes grocery stores to run out of bread and milk. "Patricia, I have contracts with 3 commercial properties and about 15 residential clients who pay for priority snow removal. I cannot just drop those commitments to plow HOA common areas for free." Her expression hardened. "I am not asking, Nathan. The bylaws are clear. In times of emergency, you must share your resources with the community. Besides, you live here. Do you not want to help your neighbors?" "I do help my neighbors. I plow Mrs. Patterson's driveway for free because she is 83 and on a fixed income. I helped the Rodriguez family dig out their mailbox last month when the city plow buried it. But what you are asking for is different. You want me to provide thousands of dollars worth of equipment and my labor for nothing. Patricia touched her pearl necklace, a gesture I had learned meant she was about to escalate. The HOA board will be meeting tomorrow evening. I suggest you attend. We will be discussing enforcement measures for residents who refuse to comply with community bylaws. It would be unfortunate if we had to pursue fines or legal action. She left without waiting for a response, her Mercedes kicking up gravel as she backed out of my driveway too fast. That evening, I called my lawyer, Tom Brennan, who had helped me set up my business and review the HOA bylaws when I first moved in. Tom had an office in downtown Milwaukee and had dealt with HOA disputes before. "Nathan, good to hear from you," Tom said when he picked up. "What has Patricia done now?" I explained the situation, reading him the exact wording of the bylaw she had cited. Tom was quiet for a moment, and I could hear him typing. "Okay, I am looking at the original bylaws from when Meadowbrook Commons was established in 1995. That clause was definitely about generators and emergency power, but here is the thing. The wording is vague enough that she could make an argument for broader interpretation. So I have to give her my equipment. No, not at all. First, you are operating a licensed business. Your equipment is not personal property, it is business assets. Second, even if the bylaw could be interpreted that way, it says make available, not provide for free. You would be well within your rights to charge your normal rates. Third, and this is important, you have existing contracts that take priority. You cannot breach those contracts just because the HOA wants you to. I felt some of the tension leave my shoulders. So what should I do about the board meeting? Attend it. Bring copies of your business license, your client contracts, and a rate sheet for your services. Make it clear that you are happy to provide services at your standard commercial rate, but you cannot work for free, and you cannot breach existing contracts. If they try to fine you or take legal action, call me immediately. The next evening, I drove to the community center for the board meeting. The community center was a modest building near the subdivision entrance, with a meeting room that could hold about 30 people. When I arrived at 7, the parking lot was already full. Apparently word had gotten around about the confrontation. The board sat at a table at the front of the room. Patricia in the center, flanked by her two allies, Deborah Manning and Craig Sheffield. Deborah was Patricia's best friend, a thin woman with a perpetually worried expression who agreed with everything Patricia said. Craig was a real estate agent who had joined the board hoping to drum up business, but had quickly become Patricia's yes man. The other two board members, Frank Morrison and Linda Chen, daughter-in-law of the man who had written the generator clause, sat at the ends of the table looking uncomfortable. Frank and Linda were reasonable people who had opposed most of Patricia's recent power grabs, but they were consistently outvoted 3-2. I took a seat in the third row, nodding to several neighbors I recognized. Mrs. Patterson was there, as were the Rodriguez family and several other residents I had helped over the years. Patricia called the meeting to order and worked through the standard agenda items. Approval of last month's minutes, treasurer's report, landscaping committee update. Then she got to new business. As many of you know, we have a significant weather emergency approaching this weekend, Patricia began, her voice taking on the tone of someone addressing a crisis. The National Weather Service is predicting up to 30 inches of snow with dangerous wind conditions. The HOA's normal snow removal contractor has informed us that they will be prioritizing main roads and commercial properties, which means our common areas may not be cleared for several days. There were murmurs of concern from the audience. Meadowbrook Commons had 3 small parks, a network of walking paths, and several cul-de-sacs that the city did not plow. Fortunately, Patricia continued. "We have a resource right here in our community." Nathan York operates a snow removal business and has extensive equipment, including several new commercial-grade plow blades that he recently acquired. Under Section 12, Paragraph 4 of our bylaws, Mr. York is required to make his resources available to the community during emergencies. She looked directly at me, and I felt every eye in the room turn my direction. "Mr. York, would you like to address the board?" I stood up, holding the folder Tom had helped me prepare. "Thank you, Patricia. I did bring some information that I think will clarify the situation." I walked to the front of the room and distributed copies of my business license, a summary of my existing contracts, and my standard rate sheet. I operate York Construction and Landscaping as a fully licensed business. My equipment represents a significant capital investment, and I have contracts with multiple clients who depend on my services. I am happy to provide snow removal services to the HOA at my standard commercial rate, which for common areas of this size would be approximately $800 per clearing, plus an hourly rate if multiple clearings are needed during an ongoing storm. Patricia's face flushed. $800? That is outrageous. You live here. You should want to help your community." "I do help my community," I replied calmly, "but what you are asking for is not help. It is demanding free labor and use of my business assets." "The bylaw you cited was written about generators during power outages, not commercial equipment. And even if it did apply, the wording says make available, not provide for free." Frank Morrison spoke up, looking at the documents I had provided. "Nathan makes a valid point. We cannot force a resident to provide business services for free. That could open us up to legal liability." Patricia glared at Frank. "The bylaws are clear." "The bylaws are vague," Linda Chen countered. "My father-in-law wrote that clause. He meant it for situations where someone could help without significant cost or hardship to themselves. He never intended it to force someone to breach business contracts or donate thousands of dollars of equipment use." The audience started murmuring, and several people spoke up in my defense. Mrs. Patterson stood, her voice shaking slightly but firm. "Nathan plowed my driveway for free 3 times last month. He has never asked for anything in return. It is not right to demand he work for free." Patricia banged her gavel, a theatrical addition she had introduced at her first meeting as president. "Order. The board will take this matter under advisement. Nathan, you are excused." I returned to my seat, and the meeting continued with other mundane items. But I could see Patricia whispering urgently to Deborah and Craig, and I knew this was not over. The next morning, I received a certified letter from the HOA. It was a formal notice stating that I was in violation of community bylaws and would be fined $500 per day until I complied with the board's request to provide snow removal services. The letter also stated that if I did not comply within 5 days, the HOA would place a lien on my property. I immediately called Tom. "They cannot do this," Tom said after I read him the letter. "This is an abuse of authority. $500 a day is unconscionable, and they cannot place a lien without going through proper legal channels. I am going to draft a response and send it to their attorney." "Do they even have an attorney?" "Every HOA has one on retainer. Usually it is someone who does basic contract work and sends scary letters. Let me handle this, Nathan. In the meantime, do not pay any fines and continue operating your business normally." Thursday afternoon, Patricia showed up at my property again, this time with Deborah in tow. I was loading salt spreaders onto my trailer, preparing for the storm that was now less than 24 hours away. "Nathan, I hope you have reconsidered your position," Patricia said, her tone suggesting she already knew the answer. My position has not changed. I am willing to provide services at my standard rate. Deborah stepped forward, holding what looked like another official document. We have amended the bylaws to clarify the emergency resource clause. As of this morning's emergency board meeting, the bylaw now explicitly includes snow removal equipment. I took the document and scanned it quickly. You cannot amend bylaws without a vote of the general membership. That is in your own governing documents. Emergency situations allow for expedited procedures, Patricia said, touching her pearl necklace again. We have 3 board members who voted in favor, which is a majority. You are now officially in violation. The fines begin tomorrow. Patricia, you are making a mistake. My lawyer is already drafting a response to your first letter. Then I suppose we will see each other in court, she replied, turning on her heel and walking back to her car. That evening, I met with Tom at his office. He had drafted a comprehensive response to the HOA, citing multiple cases where HOAs had been sued for abuse of authority and overstepping their legal bounds. The problem is, even though they are completely wrong, litigation takes time, Tom explained. They can file for a lien, and even though a judge would likely remove it, that process takes weeks or months. In the meantime, it could affect your ability to do business. So what do I do? Tom leaned back in his chair thinking. Document everything. Every interaction with Patricia, every letter, every fine notice. Keep running your business as normal. And here is an idea: when the storm hits, charge them exactly what you said you would. If they want your services, they can pay market rate. If they refuse, that is their choice. Friday morning arrived with an eerie calm. The sky was gray and heavy, and the weather reports were now predicting 36 inches of snow with blizzard conditions. The governor had declared a state of emergency, and the National Guard was being mobilized to help with emergency services. I spent the day doing final preparations, checking equipment, fueling trucks, and confirming with my contracted clients. My phone was ringing constantly with people asking if I could add them to my route. I had to turn down most of them because I was already booked solid. Around 3 in the afternoon, Patricia called my cell phone. Nathan, this is Patricia. I am calling to offer you one final chance to do the right thing and help your community. Patricia, I have told you multiple times that I am willing to help at my standard rate. Your greed is showing, Nathan. People will remember this. What people will remember is that you tried to force someone to work for free and threatened them when they refused. She hung up without responding. The snow started at 6:30 Friday evening, light flurries at first, then steadily increasing. By midnight, we already had 8 inches on the ground, and it was coming down so hard I could barely see across the street. I had been out since 10, making my first round of my contracted properties. The roads were treacherous, with visibility near zero and drifts forming wherever the wind caught. I returned home around 4 in the morning for a quick break, planning to head out again at sunrise for the second round. As I pulled into my driveway, I saw something that made me hit the brakes hard. Someone had spray painted across my barn door in large red letters, "Selfish." I sat in my truck for a long moment, anger and disbelief washing over me. Then I got out, took multiple photos with my phone, and called the non-emergency police number. The dispatcher told me that because of the storm, they were only responding to life-threatening emergencies, but I could file a report online, and an officer would follow up when possible. I spent the next 20 minutes documenting the vandalism from every angle, including tire tracks in my driveway that were rapidly filling with snow. Then I went inside, made coffee, and prepared to head back out. Saturday was a blur of snow, cold, and exhausted clients grateful that their parking lots and driveways were passable. The storm continued all day and into the night, finally tapering off around 9 o'clock Saturday evening. The final total was 38 inches, one of the biggest snowfalls in Milwaukee area history. By Sunday morning, the sun was out, and the landscape looked like a Christmas card. It also looked completely impassable. The main roads were slowly being cleared by city and state crews, but side streets and subdivisions were buried under massive drifts. I was having breakfast and planning my day when my phone rang. It was Frank Morrison from the HOA board. "Nathan, I want to apologize for how Patricia has been handling this situation," he began. "Linda and I voted against the fines and the amended bylaw. We both think this is wrong." "I appreciate that, Frank. The reason I am calling is that we have a serious problem. The common areas are completely blocked. The entrance to the subdivision has a drift that is at least 6 feet high. The mail carrier cannot get in, delivery trucks cannot get in, and several residents cannot get out of their driveways. Our normal contractor is saying it will be at least 3 days before they can get to us. That is a tough situation." There was a pause. "Nathan, I know you are well within your rights to refuse, but is there any way you could help us out? I am not calling as a board member. I am calling as a neighbor who is asking for help." I thought about it for a moment. Frank had always been reasonable, and he had voted against Patricia's schemes. "Frank, I am still willing to provide services at my commercial rate. $800 per clearing for the common areas, which includes the entrance, the walking paths, and the cul-de-sacs that the city does not handle. Given the amount of snow, I would estimate it will take me about 6 hours. That is more than fair. Let me talk to the board." "Can I call you back in an hour?" "Sure. But Frank, I need payment upfront. After the vandalism and the threats, I do not trust Patricia to pay me after the work is done." "Vandalism? What happened?" I told him about the spray paint on my barn. Frank swore softly. "I did not know about that." "That is completely unacceptable. Let me make some calls." An hour later, Frank called back. "Nathan, I am sorry, but Patricia is refusing to authorize the payment. She says you are trying to extort the HOA and that she will not negotiate with you." "Frank, I am charging my standard rate." "That is not extortion." "I know. Linda and I both told her she is being unreasonable, but she has Deborah and Craig on her side, so we are outvoted. I am really sorry." After I hung up with Frank, I went to check on my neighbors. Mrs. Patterson was snowed in completely, her driveway buried under 4 feet of snow. I spent 2 hours clearing her driveway and walkway, refusing the cookies and lemonade she tried to give me as payment. The Rodriguez family was in a similar situation. Their car was completely buried, and they could not open their front door because of the drift against it. I cleared them out too, and Mr. Rodriguez tried to pay me, but I waved him off. As I was finishing up the Rodriguez driveway, Patricia's Mercedes came creeping down the street, moving slowly through the snow-packed road. She stopped next to where I was working and rolled down her window. "I see you have time to help some people for free," she called out. Interesting priorities. Mrs. Patterson is 83 years old and lives on Social Security. The Rodriguez family has 3 young kids and medical bills from their youngest daughter's surgery. I help people who need it. What I do not do is work for free for an organization that threatened to place a lien on my property. The offer is still on the table, Nathan. Clear the common areas and we will forget about the fines. No. Then you are making a choice, and there will be consequences. She drove off, her tires spinning slightly in the snow. Monday morning, I woke to find my email inbox flooded with messages. Somehow, My contact information had been posted to a neighborhood Facebook group with a message from Patricia claiming I was refusing to help during an emergency and price gouging my neighbors. The post had been shared hundreds of times, and I was receiving angry messages from people I had never met, calling me greedy, selfish, and worse. I called Tom immediately. "That is defamation," Tom said after I forwarded him screenshots of the posts. "She is making false statements that are damaging your business reputation. I am going to send a cease and desist letter today, and if she does not take the posts down and issue a retraction, we are filing a lawsuit. Tom, I just want this to stop. I want to run my business and be left alone." I understand, Nathan, but she has escalated this beyond a simple HOA dispute. She is actively trying to harm your business. We need to respond appropriately. That afternoon, 3 of my contracted clients called to cancel their snow removal services. They had all seen the Facebook posts and did not want to be associated with someone who was being portrayed as taking advantage of people during an emergency. I tried to explain the situation, but 2 of them had already made the decision and would not change their minds. The third agreed to wait until he heard the full story. I was losing business because of Patricia's lies, and I was furious. Tuesday morning, the story took another turn. I received a call from a reporter at the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. She had seen the Facebook posts and wanted to do a story about HOA overreach and snow removal during emergencies. Her name was Rachel Kim, and she sounded professional but sympathetic. "Mr. York, I have covered HOA disputes before, and this one caught my attention because of the extreme weather event. Would you be willing to tell me your side of the story?" I hesitated, but Tom had always told me that sunlight was the best disinfectant. If Patricia was going to drag my name through the mud on Facebook, I might as well get the truth out there through a legitimate news outlet. I spent an hour on the phone with Rachel, explaining the timeline, the bylaw dispute, Patricia's demands, and the vandalism. I sent her copies of all the relevant documents: the original bylaw, the HOA's fine notice, Tom's response letter, photos of the vandalism, and screenshots of the defamatory Facebook posts. Rachel also interviewed Frank Morrison and Linda Chen, who confirmed that the emergency resource bylaw had never been intended to force business owners to provide free services. She tried to interview Patricia, who refused to comment, and then posted on Facebook that the media was being manipulated by Nathan York. The story ran on Thursday morning, both in the print edition and online. The headline was "HOA President Demands Free Snow Removal, Threatens Business Owner with Fines." The article was balanced and factual, presenting both sides of the dispute, but making it clear that Patricia had overstepped her authority and then engaged in defamation when she did not get her way. The online version of the story went viral, getting shared thousands of times on social media. By Thursday afternoon, my phone was ringing off the hook with interview requests from local TV stations and even a few national news outlets interested in the HOA angle. I did 2 TV interviews, one with the local Fox affiliate and one with a Milwaukee ABC station. Both reporters asked tough questions, but seemed to understand that I was not refusing to help. I was refusing to be forced to work for free. Friday afternoon, exactly 1 week after the storm, I received a registered letter from the HOA. I opened it with Tom on speakerphone. "Dear Mr. York," I read aloud. "Due to the recent media attention and mischaracterization of the board's actions, we have decided to suspend all pending fines and liens. However, we maintain that our interpretation of Section 12, Paragraph 4 was correct, and we expect all residents to comply with community bylaws." The board also wishes to inform you that we will be reviewing your business operations for compliance with all relevant covenants and restrictions. Tom laughed, though there was no humor in it. That is as close to an admission of defeat as you are going to get from them. The threat at the end about reviewing your business is just posturing. You have all the proper permits and licenses. Let them review whatever they want. So, is it over? The immediate crisis is over, but Nathan, I think you should consider taking further action. She defamed you, cost you business, and someone vandalized your property. We have grounds for a lawsuit. I thought about it over the weekend. Part of me wanted to just move on and forget the whole thing. But another part of me, the part that had built a business from scratch and worked 16-hour days to make it successful, was still angry about what Patricia had tried to do. Monday morning, I called Tom and told him to proceed with a defamation lawsuit against Patricia personally, not the HOA. I was also going to request that the HOA's governing documents be amended to prevent this kind of abuse from happening again. The lawsuit was filed on Wednesday. Patricia was served with papers at her home Thursday afternoon. By Friday, the Meadowbrook Commons Facebook group was in chaos, with residents taking sides and arguing about whether Patricia had acted appropriately. An emergency HOA meeting was called for the following Tuesday. The purpose, according to the agenda, was to discuss recent legal issues and potential changes to HOA governance. The community center was packed. Every seat was taken, and people were standing along the walls. I arrived early and sat in the front row with Tom beside me. Patricia looked furious as she called the meeting to order, but before she could speak, Linda Chen raised her hand. Point of order. I move that we elect a temporary chairman for this meeting, as the current president is a party to the litigation being discussed. Second, Frank Morrison said immediately. Patricia's face went red. That is not necessary. I am perfectly capable of running this meeting professionally. Nevertheless, I am calling for a vote, Linda said. All in favor of temporarily removing Patricia Henderson as chairperson for tonight's meeting, Frank and Linda raised their hands. After a moment, 3 people in the audience did as well, then 5 more, then a dozen. Soon, it was clear that the majority wanted Patricia to step aside. Patricia gathered her papers with shaking hands and moved to a seat at the side of the room. Frank took over as temporary chairman. Thank you everyone for coming, Frank began. We have a serious situation that needs to be addressed. Our HOA president has been named in a defamation lawsuit filed by a community member. More concerning, it appears that the actions leading to this lawsuit were taken without proper authority and in violation of our own governing documents. He went on to summarize the situation. Patricia's demand that I provide free snow removal, the improper amendment of bylaws without a member vote, the fine notices that exceeded the HOA's authority, and finally, the Facebook posts that constituted defamation. Linda and I have consulted with our HOA attorney, Frank continued. The attorney has advised us that Ms. Henderson acted outside the scope of her authority as president in several instances. The emergency bylaw amendment was not valid. The fine amounts were not properly authorized. And the social media posts potentially exposed the entire HOA to liability, not just Ms. Henderson personally. Patricia stood up. This is a witch hunt. I was trying to help the community during an emergency and Nathan York refused. Everything I did was within my authority as president. Mrs. Patterson stood up, her voice stronger than I had heard before. Patricia, Nathan cleared my driveway for free while you were on Facebook calling him greedy. He helped the Rodriguez family, the Kowalski family, and at least 6 other families I know of, and he did not charge any of them a penny. What he refused to do was let you bully him into working for free. Several people applauded, and Patricia sat back down, looking stunned. Frank called for a vote on several measures, removing Patricia as president immediately, appointing Linda as interim president until the next election, forming a committee to review and clarify all HOA bylaws, and issuing a formal apology to me on behalf of the HOA. All measures passed with overwhelming majorities. Patricia stormed out of the meeting before it was over, Deborah trailing behind her. The following week, the HOA's attorney reached out to Tom to discuss settling the defamation lawsuit. They offered to have the HOA pay for removing the vandalism from my barn, issue a formal written apology, and make a public statement correcting the false information that had been posted on social media. They also offered to pay my legal fees to date. In exchange, I would agree not to pursue damages beyond the actual costs I had incurred. Tom and I discussed it, and I agreed to the settlement. I was not interested in dragging this out for years or trying to extract maximum damages. I just wanted my reputation restored and an acknowledgement that what Patricia had done was wrong. The settlement was finalized in March. The HOA issued a formal apology that was posted in the community newsletter, on the Facebook group, and mailed to every resident. The statement acknowledged that I had been unfairly characterized, that I had every right to charge for my business services, and that the actions taken by the former HOA president were not authorized or appropriate. Patricia resigned from the HOA board entirely and put her house on the market. According to neighborhood gossip, she was moving to Arizona to be near her daughter. I did not wish her ill, but I was not sorry to see her go. But here is where the story takes its final turn, because nature was not done with Wisconsin yet. In mid-March, meteorologists started tracking another major storm system. This one was predicted to be even worse than the February storm. 40-plus inches of snow, sustained winds over 60 miles per hour, and temperatures dropping below zero. The governor declared a state of emergency before the storm even arrived, and the National Guard was mobilized again. Linda Chen, now the official HOA president, called me 2 days before the storm was due to hit. "Nathan, I know we have no right to ask after everything that happened, but I wanted to reach out about snow removal for the common areas during the upcoming storm." "I appreciate the call, Linda. What did you have in mind?" "We have a budget line item for snow removal, and we can authorize up to $1,500 for emergency clearing. Would that be enough to cover the common areas if we need it?" I pulled up my rate sheet and did some quick calculations. The common areas would normally run about $800 for a standard clearing, but given the predicted severity of this storm, we are looking at multiple clearings over several days. $1,500 would cover 2 full clearings, which should be enough to keep the main entrance and walking paths passable. "That would be wonderful. Can I put you down as our emergency contractor?" "Absolutely." "Have your attorney draw up a simple contract, and we will get it signed before the storm hits." The contract was signed Wednesday afternoon, 48 hours before the storm's predicted arrival. It was straightforward. York Construction and Landscaping would provide snow removal for Meadowbrook Commons common areas as needed during the March storm, at specified rates, with payment due within 30 days. The storm hit Friday night, just as predicted. It was worse than the February storm, with winds so strong they created whiteout conditions and drifts that covered first-floor windows. I was out through the night, keeping my contracted properties as clear as possible, but it was like trying to bail out a boat with a teaspoon. Saturday morning, I made my first clearing of the HOA common areas. The entrance drift was 7 feet high, and it took me 3 hours just to cut through it enough to make a single lane. I worked through the day, came home to sleep for 4 hours, then went back out. The storm finally ended Sunday afternoon. The official total was 43 inches, the second biggest snowfall in Milwaukee history. And for the first time, the Meadowbrook Commons common areas were cleared within hours of the storm ending because they had contracted properly with a snow removal service. Linda called me Sunday evening as I was cleaning equipment in my barn. "Nathan, I just wanted to say thank you. The entrance is clear, the walking paths are passable, and several residents have commented on how professional and thorough your work was." "Just doing my job, Linda." "I know, and that is exactly the point. Patricia tried to get you to donate your professional services, and when you refused, she tried to destroy your reputation. All she had to do was treat you like the professional businessman you are and pay you fairly for your work. Some people have trouble with that concept." Linda laughed. "Indeed. The HOA board met this afternoon and we voted to offer you a season-long contract for next winter. Standard commercial rates, prompt payment, professional relationship. Are you interested? Send me the contract terms and I will review them. But yes, I am interested." The contract arrived the following week, and it was everything Linda had promised. Fair rates, clear expectations, payment terms that protected both parties. I signed it and returned it the same day. Patricia's house sold in April. I saw the moving truck in her driveway one Saturday morning as I was heading out to a landscaping job. I did not stop or wave. There was nothing left to say. The vandalism on my barn had been professionally removed as part of the settlement, but I could still see faint traces of the red spray paint if I looked closely. I decided to leave it that way as a reminder that sometimes the right thing to do is stand your ground, even when someone with a little bit of authority tries to bully you into submission. My business recovered from the brief hit it took during the February incident. The clients I lost were replaced by new ones, many of whom had seen the news coverage and specifically wanted to work with someone who stood up to HOA overreach. I even got a few calls from people in other subdivisions who were dealing with similar situations and wanted advice. Tom and I became better friends through the whole ordeal. We started meeting for lunch once a month, and he often used my case as an example when teaching continuing education classes for other attorneys about HOA law. Mrs. Patterson remained a faithful neighbor and friend. I continued to plow her driveway for free, and she continued to try to pay me in cookies and lemonade. The Rodriguez family invited me to their youngest daughter's birthday party in May, a gesture that meant more to me than any payment could have. The HOA bylaw committee that Frank and Linda formed spent 6 months reviewing and clarifying every bylaw in the governing documents. The emergency resource clause was rewritten to specifically state it applied only to generators and other emergency equipment that could be shared without significant cost to the owner, and that any use of business equipment or services required fair compensation at market rates. In September, Linda ran unopposed for HOA president in the annual election. Frank continued as vice president. Deborah and Craig had both resigned from the board after Patricia left, and they were replaced by 2 younger residents who actually seemed interested in serving the community rather than wielding power. The new board was everything an HOA should be: low-key, focused on maintaining common areas and enforcing reasonable standards, and willing to work with residents rather than against them. Meetings became boring affairs about landscaping schedules and playground maintenance, exactly as they should be. I never did find out who vandalized my barn, though I had my suspicions. The tire tracks in my driveway that snowy morning had looked like they came from an SUV, and Patricia's Mercedes had very distinctive snow tires. But without proof, I let it go. Some battles are not worth fighting, especially after you have already won the war. The experience taught me several valuable lessons about business, community, and standing up for yourself. I learned that clear contracts and documented agreements protect everyone involved. I learned that just because someone has authority does not mean they have the right to abuse it. And I learned that sometimes the best response to a bully is simply to refuse to be bullied. I also learned that communities are complex ecosystems, and that one bad actor can cause tremendous damage if not held accountable. Patricia's reign as HOA president had been relatively short, but she had managed to create division, fear, and resentment in a neighborhood that had previously been friendly and cooperative. It took months for those wounds to heal, but heal they did. By the time winter came around again, Meadowbrook Commons felt like a real community for the first time in years. Neighbors helped each other with snow removal, not because they were required to by some bylaw, but because it was the right thing to do. Kids played in the common areas without their parents worrying about getting fined for some technical violation. The Facebook group became a place to share recommendations and organize social events rather than a battleground for HOA disputes. In December, the HOA organized a holiday party at the community center. I almost did not go, still wary of anything HOA related, but Mrs. Patterson convinced me to attend. I am glad I did. It was a genuine community celebration, with potluck food, kids running around, and people actually enjoying each other's company. Linda gave a short speech thanking everyone for their patience during the transition to the new board and expressing hope that the coming year would be better. She specifically mentioned the snow removal contract and thanked me publicly for my professionalism, which drew a round of applause that made me uncomfortable but also proud. As I was leaving the party, Frank pulled me aside. "Nathan, I never properly apologized for not standing up to Patricia sooner. Linda and I knew she was overstepping, but we kept thinking the other board members would eventually see reason. Frank, you stood up when it counted. That is what matters. Still, we let it go on too long and you paid the price for that. I am sorry." We shook hands and I headed home feeling like maybe, finally, this chapter of my life was truly closed. The first big snow of that winter came in early January. I was out at 2 in the morning, clearing my contracted properties, when I got a call from Linda. "Nathan, I am sorry to bother you so late, but we have a situation. The entrance to the subdivision has a major drift, and there is an ambulance trying to get to the Harris family. Their son is having some kind of medical emergency. I am 20 minutes away. Tell the ambulance to wait at the entrance, and I will have it cleared in 10 minutes once I get there." I drove to Meadowbrook Commons as fast as I safely could on the snow-packed roads. The ambulance was indeed waiting at the entrance, lights flashing. The drift was about 5 feet high, completely blocking the road. I positioned my truck and dropped the blade, clearing a path in less than 8 minutes. The ambulance drove through with a wave of thanks, and I followed it in to make sure the roads inside the subdivision were passable. The Harris family's son was stabilized and transported to the hospital. I heard later that he had suffered an allergic reaction to something he ate, and that getting him to the hospital quickly had probably saved his life. Linda called me the next morning. "Nathan, thank you for responding so quickly last night. The Harris family wanted me to pass along their gratitude." "Just doing my job, Linda." "It is more than that, though. You responded in the middle of the night during a storm to help someone in an emergency. That is exactly what Patricia claimed she wanted when she tried to force you to work for free. The difference is, we treated you with respect, paid you fairly, and you came through when we really needed you. That is how it is supposed to work. Yes, it is. I just wanted to make sure you knew how much we appreciate it. As January turned into February, and February into March, life settled into a comfortable rhythm. My business continued to grow. I hired 2 employees to help with the expanding workload, both young guys from the neighborhood who were looking for steady work and training in a trade. I enjoyed teaching them, and they enjoyed learning. The HOA contract proved to be mutually beneficial. The community had reliable snow removal that they could budget for, and I had a guaranteed client that paid on time and treated me professionally. It was such a stark contrast to Patricia's approach that it almost seemed unreal. In March, on the anniversary of the big storm that had led to the final showdown with Patricia, I was working in my barn when a car I did not recognize pulled up. A woman in her 30s got out, and I realized she looked familiar, though I could not place her. "Mr. York, my name is Jennifer Henderson. Patricia Henderson is my mother." I set down the equipment I was maintaining and walked over to meet her. "Hello, Jennifer. What can I do for you?" She looked uncomfortable, shifting her weight from foot to foot. I wanted to apologize for my mother's behavior last year. I did not know the full extent of what was happening until after she moved to Arizona and I was going through her papers. She kept every newspaper article and printed out every online comment about the situation. You do not need to apologize for your mother's actions. Maybe not, but I wanted to anyway. My mother has always had issues with control. It ruined my parents' marriage, it damaged her relationships with me and my siblings, and apparently it caused a lot of problems here. I am sorry you got caught up in it. How is she doing in Arizona? Jennifer smiled sadly. About the same as she was here, to be honest. She has already had conflicts with her HOA down there. But at least she is near me and I can keep an eye on her. I think the stress of the lawsuit and the public embarrassment really affected her. She is not the same person she was before all this happened. I did not want to hurt anyone, Jennifer. I just wanted to be treated fairly. I know, and you were right to stand up to her. My mother needed someone to say no to her. It just took me a long time to learn that myself. We talked for a few more minutes and then Jennifer left. I never saw her again, but the conversation gave me a sense of closure I did not know I needed. Patricia was not some cartoon villain. She was a person with flaws and struggles, someone who had let a little bit of power go to her head and made choices that hurt others and ultimately herself. That understanding did not excuse what she had done, but it helped me let go of the last bit of anger I was carrying. As spring arrived and the snow finally melted, I found myself reflecting on the entire experience. A year ago, I had been facing fines, threats of liens, defamation on social media, and the very real possibility of losing my business. Now, I had a growing company, a strong reputation in the community, and a working relationship with an HOA that actually functioned the way it was supposed to. The whole situation had taught me that standing up for yourself matters, even when it is difficult and uncomfortable. It taught me that documentation and proper legal support are essential when dealing with authority figures who overstep their bounds. And it taught me that communities can heal and move forward when people are willing to acknowledge mistakes and make things right. Most importantly, it taught me the difference between helping your community and being exploited by it. I still helped my neighbors. I still plowed Mrs. Patterson's driveway for free. I still gave breaks to people who were struggling financially. But I also charged fair rates for professional services and refused to let anyone bully me into working for free. That winter, As I sat in my office doing paperwork one evening, I got an email from Rachel Kim, the reporter who had first covered the story. She was doing a follow-up piece about HOA reform in Wisconsin and wanted to know if there had been any lasting changes in Meadowbrook Commons. I wrote back describing the bylaw revisions, the new board leadership, and the functional working relationship that had developed. I also mentioned that several other HOAs in the area had reached out to me asking for advice on their snow removal contracts, having learned from what happened in my community. Rachel's follow-up article ran in April with the headline, "1 year later, HOA conflict leads to positive changes." It was a much shorter piece than the original coverage, but it told an important story about how communities can learn and grow from conflict. The article quoted Linda Chen extensively. "What happened with Nathan York was a wake-up call for our community," Linda said in the article. "We realized that we had given too much unchecked power to one person, and that our bylaws were vague enough to be abused. We have worked hard over the past year to ensure that what happened to Nathan cannot happen to anyone else." Reading that article, sitting in the barn that had once been vandalized with red spray paint, I felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. Not because I had won some battle or gotten revenge on someone who wronged me, but because something good had ultimately come from a difficult situation. Change is hard, especially in established communities with entrenched leadership. But sometimes change is necessary. Sometimes it takes one person standing up and saying, "No, this is not right," to start a process that benefits everyone. I never set out to be that person. I just wanted to run my business and be left alone. But circumstances pushed me into a position where I had to choose: accept unfair treatment or fight back. I chose to fight, not with anger or revenge, but with documentation, proper legal channels, and a refusal to be bullied. That choice changed my life and my community in ways I never could have predicted. And while I would not choose to go through that experience again, I am grateful for the lessons it taught me and the positive changes it eventually brought about. As summer arrived and I transitioned from snow removal to landscaping and construction work, life felt stable and good. My business was thriving. My community was healthy. And I had learned that sometimes the hardest path is also the right path. The equipment barn still stands on my property, now with a fresh coat of paint covering where the vandalism had been. My 3 commercial plow blades, the ones that had started this whole mess, sit ready for the next winter storm. And when that storm comes, I will be ready to face it, secure in the knowledge that I am running a legitimate business that provides valuable services at fair prices. That is not greed. That is not selfishness. That is simply how things are supposed to work. And thanks to one long winter of conflict and resolution, my community finally understands that distinction. The story could end there, but there is one final detail worth mentioning. In November, as I was preparing equipment for the upcoming winter season, I received a letter from the Wisconsin HOA Reform Coalition, a statewide advocacy group. They had followed the coverage of my case and wanted to use it as an example in their push for state legislation that would limit HOA authority and provide clearer protections for homeowners. I agreed to let them share my story and even testified before a state legislative committee about the need for HOA reform. The proposed legislation would require HOAs to follow stricter procedures for fines and liens, mandate clearer bylaws that could not be arbitrarily interpreted, and provide an appeals process for homeowners who felt they were being treated unfairly. The legislation is still working its way through the state government, but the fact that it exists at all is a testament to the power of one person standing up and refusing to accept injustice. My case was not the only one that inspired the legislation, but according to the coalition organizers, it was one of the most compelling examples of HOA overreach. Standing in that committee room in Madison, telling my story to state legislators, I felt a profound sense of purpose. This was bigger than one conflict with one HOA president. This was about changing systems that allowed abuse to happen and creating protections for people who might face similar situations in the future. Will the legislation pass? I do not know. Government moves slowly, and there are powerful interests that benefit from the current system. But the fact that the conversation is happening at all feels like a victory. As I drove home from Madison that evening, watching the sun set over the Wisconsin landscape, I thought about how one snowy February morning had led to all of this. How Patricia Henderson's demand that I share my plow blade inventory had sparked a conflict that ultimately touched hundreds of lives and might change state law. Life is strange that way. Small moments create cascading effects. One person's overreach becomes another person's opportunity to stand up. And standing up, when done with principle and proper procedure, can change not just your own situation but the entire system. I pulled into my driveway as the last light faded from the sky, the barn silhouetted against the darkening horizon. Inside were the tools of my trade, plows and trucks and equipment that represented years of hard work and investment. Outside was the community where I lived, now healthier and more functional, because people had been willing to confront problems rather than accept them. And somewhere in Arizona, Patricia Henderson was probably locked in conflict with some other HOA member, unable to learn from her mistakes. I felt sad for her, truly. But I also felt grateful that she was no longer my problem. The first snow came early that year, a light dusting in late November that barely required plowing. But I was ready. My equipment was maintained and prepared. My contracts were signed and clear. And my community knew they could count on professional service at fair prices. That is all I ever wanted. That is all anyone should expect. And if it took a year of conflict, legal battles, and media coverage to establish that simple principle, then it was worth it. Sometimes standing your ground is the hardest thing you can do. But sometimes it is also the most important. And when you stand for the right reasons in the right way, you might just change more than you ever imagined possible. That is the lesson I learned from the HOA that demanded I share my plow blade inventory. And it is a lesson I will carry with me for the rest of my life.